live. This is Law Call.
Good evening and welcome to Law Call. I'm Ted Howell with the law firm of Perry & Young, and we're here tonight. We're scheduled to talk all about injuries, but with the pending threats in the Gulf, we're also going to open up and discuss homeowners' claims and preparations and things like that. So the phone lines will be open, 850-392-1544, or you can email us at lawcall@WMBB.com. And to help us go through all those various topics, I have my esteemed colleague, Lester McFadder, here to help us make it through the evening.
Thank you, Theodore.
How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm doing even better after this past weekend.
I guess so.
We both are.
You know, it was
we both are.
for the state of Florida football.
Not every
rough.
Football fan could have celebrated a victory this weekend like both of us were able to.
Right, and it's been,
for the first time this season.
And there's been a lot of times where we get to just go home and think about next week.
That's right. That's right.
But you know, we got a lot we're going to try to get in tonight.
Yes.
Because we do have another threat out there that unfortunately looks like it may be coming directly to us. But before we get to some of those discussions, let's go. We have an email question that we got in early. A young couple with a pit bull moved in next door to my mother. They claimed the dog would only bite if someone came into their yard. Yesterday, my 4-year-old niece and my mother went to the mailbox, and the pit bull went straight for my niece. My mother grabbed her up and held her over her head while the dog bit her on her leg and my mother's leg. She pulled a muscle in her neck, holding Kayla up so it couldn't get to her. How do we make sure that people are held responsible? And that's from Shelby. Les, that's one that we unfortunately see more often than we would like. But you know, first and foremost, you know, Florida is what we call a strict liability state with respect to dog bites or dog injuries related to a dog, as long as you have a legal right to be in that particular location.
That's correct. That's correct.
There are some defenses that could potentially come in play, but as a general rule, there are states that have what is referred to sometimes as a free bite rule, with the theory behind that being you don't know that the dog is dangerous until it's bitten one person, because it's, as a general rule, we're dealing with negligence, failure to use reasonable care under the circumstances. But Florida has a specific statute where if, as I mentioned, if you have the right to be in that property, then there is going to be liability if that dog bites someone or injures them, runs them over. We see that sometimes, especially with some older individuals. But Les, when you have a claim like this, what are you looking at with respect to a potential collection opportunity? Well,
ideally, you know, Ted's exactly right. In the state of Florida, when you have a dog bite, the owner of the dog is going to be strictly liable for the injury that dog causes. There is no defense to it. Now, there may be some defenses to liability, comparative fault. And the question, Shelby's question kind of alluded to that, you know, when the person said, well, they only bite if they trespass. Wow. If you trespass, or if you're provoking the dog, you're sticking your hand through the fence, the dog bites you, yes, they're still liable, but they also have a defense that you brought it on, you provoked the dog, you trespassed, you don't get those same protections. But generally speaking, when we talk about collection, since the owner is strictly liable, you either have the option of pulling it out of them personally, or hopefully they have homeowners insurance that does not exclude dog bites. A lot of homeowners policies will have coverage for dog bites. Some policies, they have a liability limit, and they may have what's called a sub-limit, which is a lower amount of money that they will pay to cover somebody's injuries from a dog bite. But some policies will exclude dog bites altogether. So really the first thing you do once you get your medical care and you're taken care of is you really want to contact an attorney to help you navigate the liability aspect, but also really the collection aspect, because that ultimately that's what we try to do is get compensation.
And that's an important thing to remember as the owner of a dog as well, is that you're making sure that you're disclosing that to your agent, discussing that with them so that you make sure that you have those protections if you're on the unfortunate side of being the owner of that dog. And if you have something like a pit bull in particular, you want to make sure and take appropriate steps to have those protections in place so that you are covered if something like this were to happen.
Right. More and more these days we see insurance companies are getting a little bit more savvy. And if you don't ask about the coverage, specifically for your dog, disclose the fact that you have a dog to your insurance company, there's a very high likelihood they could just exclude the coverage altogether because they didn't know about it. But if they know you have a dog, and it doesn't matter about breed either. You talked about, you know, some states have the one bite rule, the free bite to establish the dangerous propensity of the animal. But again, in Florida, it's strict liability, and that's regardless of what the breed is.
Irrespective.
Some states talk about dangerous breeds, and you automatically think of pit bulls and Rottweilers and maybe Dobermans, German Shepherds, bigger dogs, things like that. It really doesn't matter. I mean, you could be strictly liable if your Chihuahua got off the leash and bit you. Probably injuries wouldn't be as bad, but there's still strict liability.
Right, and that's an important thing in any area of insurance, because let's kind of talk about, we're looking at this potential that we have this storm coming out there in the Gulf or could develop and come into the Gulf. And it's a little late now to change anything with your policy, because as soon as those develop, they shut off the ability to write and to make alterations. But in advance, you typically want to make sure that you're updating your agent. If you're having additions to your home, if you're making changes, you want to make sure that you're appropriately protecting your property so that you have adequate coverages, because there's many different sublimits that come into play with respect to, for example, if you have a mother-in-law house in the back, there's a sublimit that they'll typically only allow other structures coverage up to a certain percentage. So you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself with respect to these things, with respect to your personal property, things like that, so that you are not left holding the bag if something bad is to happen. That's
right. That's right. You really do want to pull out those documents right now. We're talking about, everybody's keeping an eye on this storm because it's located roughly about the same place Hurricane Michael was located just before it turned into that hailstorm that we dealt with 6 years ago, almost 6 years to the date. So everybody that lived through Michael has learned something new, and I have no doubt in my mind they're going through the preparations now, making sure your gas tanks are full, making sure you have adequate water, making sure you have batteries. But what an equally important part of the preparation is pull out your insurance documents. Number one, make sure your policy is in effect. What happens if I thought I paid it, but I didn't get around to it. If you haven't paid your premium and your policy has canceled for non-payment of premium, you're going to be without coverage. So number one, make sure your policy is in effect. Number two, start looking at, what do I need to do? If I have to prove a claim, what are some of the things the insurance company is going to ask me to prove? And one of the best things you could do is photograph your house. Take video. Do a video walkthrough of all your rooms, your closets, your valuables. You're documenting what it is that you have just in case you do have that major catastrophic loss and you lose or damage those items. And make sure you have those important paperwork to the extent, a lot of us have our policies electronically or digitally, but if you have a paper copy or if you like paper copies, make sure you have that. Make sure you have those numbers that you need to call in order to open those claims up quickly. And if you have any major items of personal property that are either specifically insured or are covered under the general terms of your policy, and you have receipts, documentation, make sure you have those documents either with you or in a safe place so that you are properly ready to pursue that claim. We do have our first caller now. I believe that's Susie from Calhoun County. Go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, what I'm wondering, I'm a homeowner and I rent out the home. I have several renters, actually. One of mine recently, I think, acquired one of the pit bull type dogs. Am I going to be liable if that dog bites someone, or is it just going to be the person living there that the dog belongs to?
That's an excellent question, because I know there's a lot of people that rent homes, and the answer to that question is you could be, absolutely. Now, you're not going to be strictly liable. The owner of the dog is the only one that can be strictly liable. But you as a landlord, if you have knowledge that this dog is kept on your property and you allow it to be kept there, you're well within your right to say, this dog has to be in a fence. This dog has to be on a leash. You're being the reasonable property owner for these people if you're going to allow pets and you allow them to be there. As long as you're taking reasonable steps, you should be pretty well protected. But if you allow what you know to be a dangerous dog to exist on your property, this dog maybe has a history of biting people, aggressive behavior.
Is it maintained?
Is it, are they keeping it in an enclosure? Are they keeping the dog on a leash? Those are the types of things that if you know that they're not doing those things, then you as a property owner, that's really kind of the definition of negligence. I know they're doing something, I have control to keep them from doing these things, and I'm not doing anything about it. So I think as long as she's, as Susan's
taking reasonable steps,
then you're probably going to be okay. But yeah, it really becomes fact specific. You could be liable if, depending on what level of knowledge you have.
And look, depending on the terms of your lease, you can prohibit pets if that's if you so choose, and you also can require that renter have renter's insurance that could name you as an additional insured as well, so there's protection if, God forbid, something happens. Because as I know, my mother-in-law loves to ask me, can I sue for this, can I sue for that? Well, whether they're right or wrong, you can potentially get sued for it. And one of the biggest expenses that you can have is defending yourself. So it's very, very important to have that insurance policy that not only will pay out any legitimate claims, but it will also pay for an attorney to defend you. So that would be an important requirement that I would strongly consider having that as a requirement as part of your lease.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. If you rent your property to other people, require them to carry renter's insurance and require them to have you named as an additional insured under their policy. That way you get that legal protection.
Right. So that's you got the rental properties as well. You want to make sure if you have secondary, third properties, you're looking at what insurance coverages you have on those. Getting back to what we were discussing earlier on the homeowners claims, because these aren't things that you look at until something's happened. So you want to know what you have, and look. I'm of the mindset, especially after having gone through Hurricane Michael, I'm typically going to be one of the individuals that's going to evacuate if something's coming close to us.
Yeah.
But you need to make sure and understand your responsibilities as a property owner with respect to making sure you can't, you got to weatherproof your house as good as you can before you leave, and you have an obligation to mitigate any damages that come to your house. So, for example, if you have damages to your roof, you need to get that thing tarped as soon as reasonably possible, so that you can make sure that the damages don't get any worse, or you get into a situation where the insurance company can potentially try to minimize how much they have to pay you for not taking care of your property.
Right, and there's things you can do before the storm is coming during this preparation week we're going to be having. Is we're talking about storm-proofing your house, but we should probbe get into that after we take our first break, I'm guessing?
Yep, we're going to take a break, and we'll get back on that as soon as we come back. Those phone lines are open, 850-392-1544. Welcome back to Law Call. Once again, Ted Howell and Les McFadder here to answer your questions about injuries, homeowners claims, you name it. We're here to answer them. Those phone lines are open, 850-392-1544. You can email us at lawcall@wnbb.com. Les, before we took a break there, we were talking about some of your obligations as a
Right.
insured.
Well, you brought up mitigating your damages, which, mitigation of damages is one of the things that your insurance policy requires. So if you have damage to your home, you lose part of your roof, you get a big hole, something comes through the window, the way you mitigate is by protecting the remainder of your property and your house to, from being damaged further by more water coming in. So tarping the roof,
right, boarding
up the window, doing things like that. But there's also some things you can do before the storm hits. And I'm thinking a lot of the damage that we saw caused in hurricanes or tornadoes is when items get picked up and thrown around.
Yeah.
And so, take an opportunity this week to go around your backyard. If you have patio furniture, you have pool furniture, picnic tables, umbrellas, anything that might be picked up and thrown across the yard or up against somebody's house or through somebody's window, those are things that you're going to want to bring inside, put them in your garage, bring them close to your house, or just try to keep them away from open areas where
right,
they can be picked up and thrown around. And also, trees, tree limbs.
Say, if you didn't take care of some of those trees after the hurricane, if you got time this week, that would be a perfect opportunity.
If you've got some trees that look like they may be falling or that need to be trimmed, either you can do it or God's going to do it for you.
All right.
So,
Les, we got Gary from Bay County on the phone lines.
All right. Go ahead, Gary.
Good evening, guys. How you doing?
All right, Gary. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Hey, bringing up about this storm, would you recommend or would you say would be best to take pictures or record around your house, inside your house, just for insurance purposes? Because
absolutely,
you don't want the insurance company.
Absolutely, Gary. As you know, and anytime you deal with a situation with any type of insurance claims, document. So to the extent, and with our phone capabilities and the storage capacity, you can, as you just referenced there, Gary, go take a whole video of the whole perimeter of your house, the exterior, the roof, get as much of it as you can, go through your rooms, and look, even if, to the extent, it'll also help you if, God forbid, you have some situation where you get into a massive loss.
Right.
Going through and filling out those inventories of a personal property claim can be excruciating and can be extremely difficult, and you'll never remember everything that you have, but it will be a good tool not only to prosecute your claim on the first instance and let them know what they're dealing with and let them know the severity of it, but also in helping you provide that additional information to fill out those proof of loss forms and things of that nature.
Right, and then if something does happen, Ted had already mentioned, you want to make sure you reach out to your insurance company, you report the loss immediately, but go through and do that post-storm assessment as well, videotape everything. And one of the things I was thinking of, especially for folks that live in the lower lying areas where maybe you're at risk for both a windstorm event as well as a flood event.
Right.
Most homeowners policies cover windstorm only. You have to have a special policy for flood insurance, either through a private carrier or you purchase it through FEMA, a federal flood program insurance. And those insurance companies, when they start looking at the cause of the loss, was it wind, was it flood? Our friends and neighbors over in Gulf County know all too well the distinction between flood and wind, because after Hurricane Michael, there was a major wind event followed by a major flooding event. And I remember having a lot of cases, especially over in Gulf County, Franklin County. The question was it the wind or was it the water?
Right.
Which was it first? And in a few of those cases, we had clients who actually physically documented the wind damage before the surge came through. Or
we're not asking you to stay in your home.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to do that,
but this particular individual had done that.
Right, but the more you can document, the more information you have, the better, because you never know when that one extra picture, that one extra video provides that evidence you need to. So this was not flood, this was wind, or this was flood, not wind, depending on whatever your coverages are. If you have both, it's easier if you have both, and then the insurance companies kind of fight each other over which is which. But there have been some major changes to our property legislation and since Hurricane Michael that make it a lot more difficult to bring claims, a lot more difficult to get full recovery.
Yes.
It used to be that if you had a claim against your insurance company for not paying you fully, denying your claim, you would hire an attorney. The attorney would go and prosecute the claim. If you were successful, the insurance company had to pay your attorney's fees because they breached the contract. And under the law, they shouldn't have breached the contract, so their punishment is not only do they have to pay the claim, now they have to pay the attorney's fees on top of that.
Right.
That is gone. That is gone. And so that's one of my big concerns if we have one of these big storms, is you're going to have some folks out there that have a claim, and getting legal representation is going to cost you money that might otherwise have been allocated to fix your home. That is one of the major legislative changes in property law litigation in the state of Florida. My biggest fear is that it's going to take one of these big events for people to really realize
how bad
what a mistake that was.
Them, and creating that.
God help us. I hope it doesn't happen.
In some of those same veins, one of the things that we saw that was really atrocious after the last storm was some of the contractors that came through afterwards. Right. So please be prudent in checking to make sure anyone that you allow to do any work on your property is properly licensed and insured. You can go to DBPR, that's the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, and you can search for contracting licenses. And also, it's been severely curtailed on what can be done in any event, but never do any kind of documentation that assigns your benefits.
Right.
I think those have been pretty much precluded at this point, but you don't want to sign anything that is giving someone else the ability to attack or go after the proceeds of your insurance, because it may sound like a good idea. We're just going to go to your insurance to get this paid for, but then you have a limited fund on that policy,
right.
And you want to make sure that's properly taken care of to take care of your entire home.
Right. And Ted, we do kind of pick at our buddies in the legislature quite a bit, for things that have changed. But I do kind of understand the rationale behind wanting to advance some of this litigation, because there are a lot of very good contractors and very good subcontractors out there that do great work. And there's a lot of people, the storm chasing type, that come in and they have predatory practices. I think a lot of the legislation was geared to try to curtail a lot of these unlicensed contractors from coming in and doing work and creating more problems. And so I understand the rationale behind it, but the biggest thing we as a community can do is you want to make sure, like Ted said, when somebody's offering to come do a service, check them out. Make them provide you with a copy of their Accord statement showing that they have insurance. You do not want an unlicensed contractor working on your house, because if you do, number one, you're going to have a ton of problems most likely, but then if you have legal issues later on, you're going to have to depend on somebody unlicensed to help you prove your claim, and that's just a nightmare.
It's a nightmare on top of a nightmare. We're going to take our final break of the evening, but those phone lines will still be open when we get back, 850-392-1544. Welcome back to Law Call. This is our last segment of the evening. Just as we've been discussing here, as you know, we have this potential system out there. Make sure and take it seriously. It's not something that you can just ignore and put your head in the sand, but also you got to wait as information develops. There's no reason to panic at this point in time, but just be prepared. Get those essentials, get your water, get your batteries, get your things, make sure you're totally fueled up, things of that nature. And look, if we do have a system that comes through, make sure and be deliberate about what you do.
Yeah,
make sure you're checking your sources. Don't rush.
And don't panic either.
Yeah.
I mean, we had heard before that there's already people starting to clear out shelves and things like that. There's no need to panic. Just be prepared, because there's a lot of folks that need those resources out there. So keep that in mind.
Yes. All right, Les, you got any shout-outs for the evening?
I do. I have a couple shout-outs. I want to give a shout-out to young man, our Perry and Young Scholar Athlete of the Week, Logan McAllister. Good job, man.
Yes, very good.
Man, Mosley's football team's looking
they are
pretty
rolling.
unstoppable. They are a juggernaut this year. I'm looking forward to see.
Go on the road to Milton this
Yeah,
weekend.
I'm looking forward to see how they finish the year, and then of course basketball season. Can't wait for that.
There you go.
I want to give a shout out to my mom and dad, my wife Jen, and my son Eli are at home. Miss Pam, thank you for watching us every week. We love you. My man Rick at the Marlin. My friends Nick and Lauren, and the Perry and Young staff. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Y'all are the best in the business, and thank you for everything y'all do for us.
No, they take care of us and they get us where we need to be. I don't really have any shout-outs this weekend. I asked my wife, had to travel outside of town this weekend, so she's on. So I'm taking care of the kids. I got my dad here to help me, so I wonder if he was able to stay up and watch this.
Don't forget G-Money.
G-Money, you know, always a pleasure to have him watching. I saw he was live and on the show, so. And I think we had a Gary call. Wonder if that was Gary's star that made that call.
Could have been.
But we'll be back next weekend with a specialized show. So tune in and let's hope that we have averted a hurricane by then. So.
Stay safe. God bless.